Good afternoon and welcome to a fairly brisk and cool afternoon here at Oslo's International Airport. Guys, today we're going to be flying with Qatar Airways aboard their brand new 787-9 Dreamliner featuring their latest business class product. I actually saw it a year or so ago and thought it looked absolutely superb. Did get a chance to try it just then, whereas this afternoon we're going to be trying it together for the very first time. So let's head along to the airport, get checked in, and we'll get on our way to Doha. Well, it's a Tesla, Uber, of course, being Norway. Arriving into the airport, it doesn't look anything particularly special from the outside, although having said that, the views just beyond the airport look absolutely fantastic. But getting inside, I was really impressed. I thought Oslo Airport was absolutely stunning. Well, I do seem to be getting the luck of the airports recently. It's gloriously quiet here, maybe to be expected around midday sort of time. Just heading to the check-in just now, expecting a fairly smooth and easy check-in experience, no doubt, with the priority check-in offered as part of the business class experience, of course, and then it'll be through to the lounge. Well, I'm pleased to report that check-in was indeed silky smooth. They had a dedicated lane for business class and also their status members. I went straight to the front and it wasn't long before my bag was on the belt and I was heading through departures through to the lounge. Well, it's odd of me to comment on the security, but that had to be far and above the most efficient security I've ever seen. I'd like every single airport manager in the world to be forced to come here and see exactly how it works. The speed that they were getting people through at was absolutely phenomenal. An awful lot of new technology and operations in place, but that was pretty good. Now it's time to find the lounge. I'm not quite sure exactly where this one is. I've been told it's up near gates E8, so heading down to that just now, and then we'll check it out. Qatar Airways sadly didn't have their own lounge at Oslo. It was to be a fairly generic airline style of lounge. If you were travelling in the business class, there was a little exclusive area that you could go into. The food and beverage offering, however, on that side was no different to the main lounge, but this would have been ideal had the lounge been a little bit busier on the standard side and you could have got away somewhere a little bit quieter. That said, on that particular day, everywhere was particularly busy. I didn't indulge too much in the food and beverage offerings as I was looking forward very much to having something as soon as I got on board. One thing I did indulge in, however, was a glass of the cava, which I swiftly spilled all over my brand new suitcase. I can attest, certainly from experience, that level 8 suitcases are cava proof on the top, at least. I should say, guys, I was trialing a brand new suitcase on this particular trip that didn't have zips. It was a little bit odd at first, but actually I got used to it really quick, and I'm not sure now how I'm going to go back to a zip suitcase. I loved the efficiency of it. Alrighty, so that was a fairly brief visit to the lounge, just enough time to grab a quick snack, but of course it'll be lunch, one would hope, on board. We'll shortly be boarding onto this aircraft. Can't wait to check it out, guys. Should say, if you're watching my channel for the very first time, it'd be wonderful to have you subscribed if this sort of content is your thing. I've got so much more on the channel from the likes of British Airways, American Airlines, and so many other carriers. So if you hit that subscribe button, the content will come up for you that bit more often. As for now, let's jump on board. Well, it's very much excitement on the gate. There was our ride over to Doha. It's a 787-9. These are the aircraft which feature these new seat designs. Couldn't wait, frankly, to jump on and see exactly what it was going to be like for the very first time. Jumping aboard, as ever, it was a very warm welcome from Qatar Airways. It's always an absolute pleasure to be back on board with them. First impressions of the seat, well, they were looking absolutely fantastic. Quick history lesson really on this one. This seat has come around purely because the 787 cabin isn't wide enough for the full Q suite, so they needed to innovate something ever so slightly different. I was in seat 1K and I thought it looked absolutely brilliant. Getting to the seat was then that signature Qatar Airways bedding and also a really nice looking amenity kit waiting for me on the side. I'm not going to have a go at pronouncing the name. One of my viewers so kindly a few months back taught me how to pronounce this, but frankly, I've already forgotten. I do need to catch up with that comment again. There was then also the Travel with Confidence kit, and just behind it, the controls for the entertainment system. I was a big fan of the placement of the charging socket. There was also then a USB charger here, and just above it a wireless charger, which we'll take a little bit more of a look at in just a moment. Just to the left of this was then a storage area vanity. We had a mirror, a water bottle waiting for you, and also the headset for the entertainment system. Everything just felt like absolute quality to the touch. I thought it was a wonderfully put together cabin, and I was just as impressed as I really hoped that I would be. Just down to the left, talking about additional storage with the outgoing product, there is a little storage area just here. This was purely just a large armrest that you could raise and lower, which was ideal for getting out during meal times. In terms of in-seat lighting, there was a couple of lights just above the seat and also some individual air vents. Just to the right-hand side of the seat for me, next to the window, was this wonderful new lamp. I've seen something ever so slightly similar on Etihad. When the cabin does get a little bit darker, you will see these really come alive. They're a really classy touch. And finally, just on the seat front, purely for comparison, here is the outgoing product. This still features on a number of the 787-8s and also the A350-900s, at least the ones that I went onwards with. You can see here an awful lot less privacy with the outgoing product, and it does look that bit more dated. I really did think their new design was a huge move forward. Shortly after getting settled into the seats, the menus were then brought around. We'll take a look at those in just a moment, and then also the loungewear courtesy of the White Company. With a top level overview of the new versus old out the way, let's get a little bit more into the specifics of the new seat design. I thought the new table design was really super. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. There was then some further storage in front of me, and then just down to the side were the main controls for the seat itself. Okay, so that's us on board. The champagne has just been brought around, so cheers. Here's to what's going to be, I think, a pretty good flight over to Doha. And here is that champagne in question. It was a Laurent Perrier Brut. It's a little bit of a tradition for me to have this when I'm boarding with Qatar Airways. That was then twinned with a fresh towel, which was similarly branded to the Amenity kit. With me on board nice and early, it gave me plenty of time to head up and check out the bathrooms before we departed. These were kept in an absolutely wonderfully clean state throughout the entire trip. I particularly like the fact that the Dreamliner's bathrooms do include a window, and was so glad that these were retained on the -9 variant. The bathrooms also have some additional amenities such as toothbrushes as well, and with that window closed, the whole look and feel of the bathroom changes with that mood lighting playing a little bit more of a part. We will take a little bit more of a look of the new seat design as we get up into the sky, so do stay tuned for that. With all that being said, it was then time for me to get back to the seat, get settled in, and get ready for pushback. As we taxied out to the departure runway, the skies looked increasingly stormy, so I will let you sit back, relax, enjoy the takeoff, and see if indeed we can beat these storms as we depart. It was my first time visiting Norway as part of this trip, but I have to say, from my albeit very brief visit, it was an absolutely beautiful country, and I can't wait to get back to it into the future. Thankfully, for the departure up and out of Oslo, we didn't suffer too much with those storms, and it wasn't long before we were punching up above the cloud layer and getting ready for a full in-flight service with Qatar Airways. We'll kick off all things in flight with a quick look at the Amenity kit. I thought it was really nicely put together. My one on the way back did have more of a traditional leather bag. I do have to say I do ever so slightly prefer that. However, in terms of the holistic offering, you had some sleep socks, some earbuds, also an eye mask just there, and a full concoction of various different lotions and potions as you'd expect as well. So a good start from Qatar Airways on that front. With us now being in flight, the suite doors were unlocked so I could bring the view of those to you. I thought they were far larger and far better than the new doors, for example, as part of British Airways' new club suites. The overall feeling of space within the suite was far better, I must say, than I was expecting. So it was really a case of best of both worlds, both space and also that feeling of privacy. With the headphones now on screen, you know what that means. Next up, entertainment. The RX-1 system features over 4,000 entertainment options. As part of the 787-9, some absolutely wonderful forward views. I particularly like these big screens. You did have the controller just down to the side if you prefer to use that. Otherwise, however, I found the screen to be really responsive and a huge amount of options just there for you throughout the flight. Next up, on the Wi-Fi front, there was a couple of different options available. Thanks to the Privilege Club, 1 hour of complimentary Wi-Fi was offered for members. I actually went for the paid package on this particular occasion. It was just a flat fee of $10 for the entire flight, which I felt was pretty decent value for money. Just towards the rear of the cabin was then a small socialising area that they'd set up. This is where passengers could stand up, get a bit of a leg stretch, and also access to a few different snacks that were available, including some fruits. Didn't see anyone using it on the flight, but was nonetheless a nice little feature of the cabin. I was on my feet, however, for a very different reason. I got up to try the brand new loungewear. How good does that look? I can certainly attest. It was very comfortable throughout the flight. On getting back to my seat was a little bowl of nuts and then also one of their champagne cocktails. It was a wonderful start to the food service on board. At that point, we were tracking just east of Copenhagen with a view out towards the city. Just out of my window, just there, you can see how those lights that I was referencing were playing really nicely with the slightly darker cabin environment. During the food service, I made full use of the television screen just to track our progress and see where we were heading. On that particular day, we tracked down over Eastern Europe and then through down towards Doha. A little view just there down towards Copenhagen. Just before we get into the food service, a quick look at the menus to see exactly what was on offer on that particular flight. The main service was to be a lunch or indeed early dinner. It made perfect sense at that time of day. There was then a light snack shortly before landing into Doha. 4 courses in total and a really good selection per course. I went with the braised lamb shank for my main course and it was absolutely fantastic. One of the best meals I have to say I've had in the skies with Qatar Airways. Just on the overside of the menu was then the selection of all of the various different soft drinks on board. Of course, many of you may well be wondering where are the alcoholic drinks, and they were all located within the cellar. Just here, you had a wonderful write-up of all of the various different options that were fully available for you throughout the entire flight. On a recent Qatar Airways flight around the same sort of time last year, I was a little bit critical of some of the wine offerings. They'd seemed to cheapen ever so slightly. On this particular flight, however, they were back to their brilliant best. That 2015 from Bordeaux was very expensive, around £65 a bottle, and absolutely fantastic, I must say. Few cocktail lovers, just on the last page of the cellar menu were then the full list of various different spirits and cocktails that you could go for throughout the flight. There was a little amuse-bouche served just to get us kicked off to the food service on that particular day. I'd opted for a glass of the Chardonnay. It was the standout white wine offering on that particular day. So let's give it a taste and see how it goes. One very satisfied customer just there. I'd paired that with the salmon to get things underway. I must say, if you are ordering the salmon, I would probably just about go for the Sauvignon Blanc, ever so slightly better with the seafood, but it does come down to personal preference. A really good start to the food service. I didn't opt for the bread selection on that particular day. That little side plate is where it would go. I was keen to get through, of course, as many courses for you all as possible, so didn't want to fill up on the bread. Just there was that wonderful lamb and there was that fantastic red wine which washed it all down so beautifully. I followed up the main course with the international cheese selection. This was beautifully put together. I was then still on the French red, which paired nicely. However, there was a bottle of port on the menu, which also no doubt would have paired fantastically well. And to top it all off, I finished the meal service with this vanilla and blueberry cheesecake with a little bit of white chocolate on the top, paired with an Austrian dessert wine, which I must say is one of the best I've ever had. With us being around halfway or so throughout the flight, the cabin lights were dimmed, and I must say the cabin really came alive. It did look incredibly smart. After such a heavy lunch, I was well ready for a couple of hours sleep. I made up the bed and couldn't wait to try it out. Just before heading to sleep, the crew brought around a freshen up towel, which I thought was a really nice touch just to get you feeling as fresh as possible before a couple of hours sleep. I then shut the suite door, and that facilitated for such an incredibly private space. In terms of leg room in the bed, no issue at all. I'm 180 centimeters, had no issue getting some rest. I must say, as sleep goes, it really doesn't get any better than that. I woke up feeling incredibly refreshed. There was just one more sweet treat waiting for me at the seat when I got back from the bathrooms. It was to be these Swiss chocolates, and they provided a nice way of finishing off the flight and starting our descent down into Doha. Now being an almost summertime arrival down into Doha, the temperatures were very high and the air was pretty humid, so the view out that I got wasn't the best, that's for sure, on that particular evening. So with that all being said, I'm going to give you my final thoughts on camera as soon as we land down into Doha. But before I do so, you've seen the food, the entertainment, the complete offering as part of this new product. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments just below. Alrighty, so that's the business class with Qatar Airways aboard their new Dreamliner. Overall, I thought it was really good as ever, supported by absolutely phenomenal onboard service. I thought the food was very much on point, and that new seat design was absolutely fantastic. As good as the Q Suite? Well, I'll let you decide just below. For me, it was actually would be as good as the Q Suite. We'll see about Q Suite 2.0 as that's released in the coming years. However, no real areas for improvement. So all that's left for me to say is to thank you so much for watching today's video. Very much hope you found it useful. I'll be shortly transferring on here to one of the shortest Q Suite flights, so that video will hit the channel in the coming weeks, I'm sure. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch up with you in another one real soon.